This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 368, the Friday, September 21st, 2018 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you, not from the Brooklyn bunker today, but from the shadow of the Chrysler Building, right near Grand Central Station. The DRF offices in New York. I haven't gotten a call too often lately on the DRF Players Podcast, and probably won't in the future, but I'm here today and happy to be here. Always nice to get a chance to come in and see colleagues like producer Craig and video kingpin Dan Illman in the flesh. I am joined today by a man who really needs no introduction. He is destined to take the place of the mud shark in your mythology. Yes, I was listening to Frank Zappa this morning. He's also the people's champion. He's from the planet Texas. He's Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's going on? Yeah, I was a little bit concerned. When you were closer to the offices, because I like to blame the internet problems on you, and suddenly it's now going to be much more difficult to do so. I feel like I'm going to get definitely in trouble today for internet connection. We'll see what happens.
After your whole dodgy Mexican Wi-Fi thing, JK, I don't know. You shouldn't be casting the Wi-Fi aspersions. But we all know who the secret culprit is when it comes to the Wi-Fi issues we've occasionally had in the past on this show. And typically it's neither me nor you. We'll just leave it at that. But we're here today. We've got the bandwidth. We've got the knowledge. We're ready to talk about some racing. We're ready to talk about this FanDuel situation. Want to say before we get into that, later in the show, going to be joined by a very special guest, Justin Nicholson, one of the co-founders of Equestricon, board member of the Thoroughbred Idea Foundation, accomplished contest player, and so much more. He'll be joining us a little bit later. But I wanted to spiel with you for a bit beforehand. And this conversation, it's like the conversation that won't end on Twitter with breaking news last night. For those who haven't heard about this story, we'll give a little bit of background. There was an in-game wager made at an erroneous, what was later claimed, well, what was clearly an erroneous price. And there was an issue of whether or not FanDuel Casino was going to come up off the $80,000 that this punter was owed. It looked like the man was not going to get paid on this in-game wager. Many, including myself, expressed skepticism about this for a variety of reasons. Ultimately, it was decided in what might be described as a marketing move, what might be described as a move after consulting with a lawyer, that the man would get paid, JK. I think it's a great victory for people on our side of the counter. It makes me think about a lot of things relating to horse racing. I, for one, now granted, if you ask the average horse player, I think 9-1 people would have supported the idea that this bettor should have gotten paid. But on the other side, in the 10% of the casino should have won, there are some smart, very respected people whom I usually just say, you know what, I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong, and they're right when it comes to any disagreements we have. In this case, I feel pretty strongly, though, JK. What was your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you made some really good points. You know, we've all made bets in error that we wish we could have back, that we lost, that we didn't get back, right? I mean, it's not really a fair game. You know, yes, I think the guy should have been paid. However, I am aware that all those casinos that you walk into and sports books that you participate in and ADWs, there's typically a rules page where it talks about all of the house rules. And one of those rules typically is that, if there is an error made, they have the right to not have to give you the blah, 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 blah. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good business. I don't think it's good marketing. But there is a certain part of it where when that guy took his ticket, he knew that it was an error. He knew that they were wrong. He knew that there's no way that price was right. And so it's not as if it was like some misleading false advertising. That's a little bit dirtier to me. I think it was just an honest mistake that the system made, and I'm glad they gave the dude his money. But I wasn't going to lose a ton of sleep and write a letter of disgust if they didn't pay him.
Well, for their own sake, thank goodness they did. Now, I've never run a sports book. I've never worked in a sports book. What I believe is supposed to happen in this instance, and I've heard stories like this. In fact, Mike Maloney, when we were out in Vegas doing a VSiN radio appearance to promote the book Betting with an Edge back in January, afterwards we had the pleasure of sitting down with one of my podcasting and broadcasting idols, Gil Alexander, and his producer, Georgie Bueno. And Mike told a story about a similar situation where a casino had bet him something in error. And the casino didn't back off and say, oh, look at Rule 3.0226, paragraph C, this garbage rule that says we don't have to pay if we make a mistake. No. Instead, what they said was, we made a mistake. What's it going to – we're not going to pay that bet. What's it going to take to make you happy? And some numbers were discussed. And very quickly in the conversation, being a reasonable man, Mike said, stop right there. I'm happy. And I think – no, I don't know. Maybe that did happen. Maybe the punter, knowing the sensitivity of the situation, being a whole new deal, the whole sports betting in New Jersey, maybe he dug in his heels and was going for this outcome. Somehow I don't think so, though. And, the thing should have been – probably what should have happened is some negotiation should have been reached where the punter was happy, the casino saves face, and then hopefully they take in-game betting off the board until such time as they could figure out all the kinks in the system. Because the nature of in-game betting, I'll let you talk in a second, but the nature of in-game betting is such where it's all split-second decisions. And, I know this from time spent in England. I don't have a ton of experience myself in in-game betting, but I get the drill through my, various associates in the UK, including Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today. And it's a lot of split-second decisions, and things happen very quick. You can win or lose a lot of money. They talked about the 18-second window. These erroneous odds were out there. You will make or break your year in 18 seconds in in-game betting. It's significant. And I think the nature of in-game betting also changes this from some of the other situations that have been described.
So I have two questions. One is, do you feel like this is like a fat finger situation, or is this stuff all automated? That's my first question for you. And the second one is, and I don't think there is, but I'm hoping you can help me kind of just play imaginary. What's a scenario in which we could experience something? What's a scenario that this could have happened in racing? Or can that not really happen because we're not fixed odds? It doesn't really matter what price you think you got it at. It's what it closes at, and that's how it goes. So those are the two I kind of wanted to poke you about.
Very interesting. The first one, I honestly have absolutely no idea, but I do know this. If you're going to be offering this new kind of wagering, you've got to get yourself wired on straight. It's new. It's radically different. And this is another reason why I felt all along like the right move was to pay. Not only is the whole enterprise new, but specifically this kind of wagering is fairly new. And, in all the years the M and other places have had in-game betting in Vegas, I don't know, maybe this has happened and it just for some reason didn't get publicized. Maybe when their errors happened, casinos squashed it in the way that I was mentioning before. But it is notable that we've never heard this type of story. It's not like in-game betting is new out there, but it is new here. And it just, whatever the issue is, obviously the bottom, they need to get to the bottom of it and in a hurry. And I would actually recommend just suspending in-game betting until they do. It would seem to be the smartest thing. As for the second half of your question, JK, I think we could find analogs, right? Numbers on the board being posted incorrectly before it was made official. I had that happen to me. I think I told the story here on the podcast about one of the worst beats I ever had down at Fair Hill one Memorial Day, where I was at the line at a funny angle, so it was hard to tell, but I was pretty darn sure I got pipped for third in the try. And then announcer Tony Bentley announced the order of the try in the order that I had, and I just thought it was some miraculous gift from the racing gods. And then a minute later, now it never went official the numbers never even went up on the board. It was just him saying it. But easily the numbers could have gone up on the board before it had been made official. And then it was corrected. Oh, actually, I didn't sweep that trifecta pool. In fact, I got nothing the way it actually happened. I would have never expected to get paid in that situation, though it did make it extra painful. That's for sure. I suppose you could have a computer glitch and have a wrong price put up on the board. I've never seen that. And in that instance, I think that the right move would be to pay both, pay what was told was official at that point, as well as what it actually should have been. But to my knowledge, that hasn't happened. There are surely some analogs in the racing industry, but I do think it's very different. And it's also such a different culture, JK, when you're talking about parimutuel betting versus the house and the bettors. And it's sort of an interesting culture. And another thing, to get back to the sharp people who were, sort of, I don't want to exactly say they were on the casino's side, but at least defending the casino's point of view in these interests. I felt like there was almost some sort of holdover from a parimutuel environment where it's not you against the house, it's you against the players. So there was a little bit of like suspicion or lack of respect about the player in the situation, and this idea that the guy was trying to like put one over, which again, I don't buy in in-game betting. Everything happens so quick. You see a mistake, you pounce on a mistake. It's not like if you stop and think, oh, did that guy on, if you're playing on Betfair in running and you stop and think, oh, is that a mistake that guy put up? No, it's gone. You take it, and you're not being a predator. That's just the way the game works. And when it's a house on the other side instead of another person, I guess I was just surprised it wasn't 100% with the punters and against the house on this issue.
I get that. And I mean, look, I'm glad they did what they did. I think it was the right thing to do. I think that when in all businesses, when in doubt, side with the customer. I think when you do that, you create goodwill. When the moment you start sticking it to the customer for your mistake, your business becomes very volatile and becomes, it can kind of leave people with a sour taste, and you lose customers. Whatever it is, whether it's you're buying a hamburger that was overcooked and whatever it is, the customer's always right. So I'm glad they made that decision. The only story I can ever think of about this is when I was in, this was like probably before like DRF bets and all the other ADWs became really popular. I was playing a pick four at Oaklawn through like one of those offshore like things online, 15 years ago. I was probably still in college, and I hit a pick four that paid 3 out of 4, which is almost hilarious to me now, because I can't even imagine a pick four that pays 3 out of 4. But I hit a pick four that paid 3 out of 4, and the rules on the site were that they pay the track payout. But there is another rule that said they don't play the consolation. And I fought it and fought it and fought it and fought it, and they finally paid me. But it took a long, long time. And then they changed the rule. That was the first time there was actually a Jonathan Kinchin rule that was put into play. They changed the rule to say that they don't pay 3 or 4 or 5 and 6, whatever.
There's a couple of ways to look at the decision. One is that it's great marketing. I mean, one of the things I know that I love to do in life is to turn a negative into a positive. This was looking like a crazy negative, right? I mean, just you couldn't have worse publicity for a new sports book than they won't pay up to bets that they issued. And they've gone from that to being like, hey, we're doing the right thing by this player, or it's not been fully clear to me if there were other tickets as well. I presume there were. So it's not an insignificant cost to them to pay this out. But again, from a marketing point of view, it's really the only way forward. Probably would have been better to squash it along the lines of what I said in the first place, pay some sort of conso. I mean, the original conso offer also was very insulting. $600 in Giants tickets, which is others have pointed out is really just a form of torture anyway. But
especially because they're 0-2, yeah, they're a little bit better.
The other piece of it though is, maybe they didn't think they were going to win this lawsuit if it went. The more cynical, well, I don't know if it's more cynical, but it feels that way. they didn't think they were going to win if it went all the way if it went all the way to the courts. So, at any rate, I'm glad for the way it turned out. Other news this week, JK, New York Gaming Commission about to have a vote about allowing jackpot bets. Don't want to linger on this one too long. We got Justin coming up in a few minutes, but just to give you a chance, because I know you have a strong opinion on this, I have a strong opinion on this, and this just seems like an opportunity to at least give that opinion in a civil manner. What do you think?
The jackpot bet, in my opinion, is a misleading line item in a racetrack's QuickBooks. It appears to be something better than it is. It 2 or 3 days out of the year, it creates these wonderful opportunities with big numbers and big carryovers and $20 million pools. But at the same time, I think it's damaging in a lot of ways. With one of the biggest ways, and I think the ways that a lot of other people miss is that it's cynically marketed as an opportunity, when really the small guy doesn't really have the chance that the 20-cent wager seems as if it's providing. And second of all, the other issue is it takes all of this churn out of circulation, which is not beneficial in the long run to the bettor and to the game. I understand why certain racetracks do it. I'd actually be okay with just Gulfstream having it. It kind of works for Gulfstream and what Gulfstream is, but it's spreading rampantly throughout every single situation. And I was a little bit sad when we lost the $2 wager at Santa Anita recently, and Naira was kind of the only one left. Now, with that said, I've seen some quotes from Dave O'Rourke who suggested that and I know we've had conversations behind the scenes about how difficult it is sometimes to get things done at Naira because of the nature of the bureaucracy there. But I think they just wanted to get this approved if they decided that they wanted to do it, that it's not necessarily we are going to do it. Still not positive, but
it's the New York State bureaucracy. You're not criticizing.
No, of course,
Naira.
The bureaucry in New York for Naira to get things accomplished.
Correct.
Why contests were an uphill battle for the times, to get them where they needed to get them, and so on and so forth. People were always wondering, why is there no live money? No, it wasn't so much because of Naira. It was more because of the bureaucracy that they had to go through in order to get it done.
Wasn't at all because of Naira. You had people like Donnie Nelson and Kathy when she was over there fighting for years to get it done. Donnie saw that fight through to the end. Kathy came to work for us, but fortunately that change did get made. But all right, I got an easy one for you, JK. The option to do it, no thanks. Can we please keep the $2 pick six in one place? It obviously, with the pools we get in New York, the $2 pick six is a bet that works. And just to piggyback on what you were saying about the jackpot bet, cynically marketed as a bet to the everyman, but just to spell it out a little bit more, what it does is allow computer groups, it's a benefit for computer players who can use those 20-cent intervals to bet combinations extremely efficiently and just drain regular horse players' money out of the pools. I mean, that's honestly how I see it. Am I exaggerating?
No, not at all. And one of the things, and a little behind the scenes with the Breeders' Cup Wagering Committee, one of the conversations we've had is to keep it at $2 or to change it to 20 cents. And it's a conversation that's continuing to be had. And Paul Matisse said it best, and Tom Quigley actually was the one who kind of started it. But it's a championship event, so let's keep it a championship wagering event as well. And the 20-cent situation is not. It's an illusion that it creates this great opportunity for everyone to get involved. But the truth is that if you can't afford to play the $2 pick six, you probably should put your equity in a pool that has a higher strike rate anyway. And so I hope it doesn't, and you know what, the $2 pick, if you think about it, the $2 pick six, if you think about what happened last week with the $50,000 carryover that turned into $2.8 million, or excuse me, $300,000 carryover that turned into 2.8 million. I mean, that's higher than the quote unquote typical ratio that you see. What we say 4 to 5 times the carryover is what we're seeing. That was almost 8 times.
It is interesting, and it is a great point about the money that can be made. And it's funny because purely from a ticket construction point of view, I get the idea. And I was always in favor of low minimums because they allow the smaller player to construct tickets the way that a pro player or players with bigger bankroll can. But I think that what we've seen in terms of the reality of the marketplace is that they've really just allowed the equity to be drained out of these pools. And I was sort of hoping the $2 pick six would remain as such. And as you point out, maybe it will. But anyway, that's just some news of the day. Thought it was a good opportunity for us to get our 2 cents in there. I want to bring in our guest now, JK. If I gave his full resume, if I gave one of my typical flowery intros, we'd spend the rest of the time talking about things that our next guest does. We're just going to, for now, go with a horseman, a successful contest player, a board member of the Thoroughbred Idea Foundation, and one of the co-founders of Equestricon. Justin Nicholson, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Of those different sobriquets or credits that I gave in introducing you, which one are you the most invested in, if I can make you pick between them?
I mean, I think in my core, the owner-breeder element is always going to be number one. I mean, that's what got me here. That's why I'm all over the place. Is that I love the sport. I love the horses themselves. I love the industry, and I want to do what I can to make sure it's here for a long time and growing. So I think at the core of it, just being an active participant as owner and breeder.
Let me know how you got into that in the first place.
Family, which is not surprising, I'm sure. My dad was a little older when I was born. He was almost 60 when I was born. So I was, I came along late enough in life that I think he had in mind that he wanted to have a hobby to share with his kid, and he might not be playing too many sports too much longer. So he got into racing when I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I don't know that he ever expected how much I'd grow to love it. But by the time I was going to college, I was, going to the auctions and picking out horses for us and kind of managing our breeding operation. And I went from kind of passive participant / fan of everything to very quickly kind of running a racing business, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Fantastic. Now, your experience as a horseman must inform some of the successful horse playing that you do. That's not always a double that you see. There are certainly some people on the breeding side who also are horse players, but you seem to have that a little more than the average horseman. To what do you attribute that?
Well, to some degree, you have to at least be willing to embrace a little degeneracy, which I am. So, not every owner takes the dive into the betting side as it is. So that's part of it. But no, I mean, I think I also try to bring the handicapping side into the ownership side. They work both ways. I mean, I think you start to get a feel for trainer intent in a lot of races. You kind of get a read for what someone's trying to accomplish. You start to get a feel for how they train in the mornings and the patterns they use, so that can work for handicapping or for, as an owner, trying to figure out, where do I want my horse to be in a particular race in terms of positioning. Everything's so kind of intertwined, and I think for somebody to be, really involved in one side and kind of leave out the other side, I think they're probably missing a bit of the experience, and it can only help inform you.
And how do you see handicapping contests fitting into the mix?
Well, for me, it's great because I think that there's definitely a gap for me, and I'm sure many others say the same thing, but between my handicapping and my betting, there's definitely a gap there. And, I played a lot of poker too, when I was in college and around that time, and I always enjoyed tournament playing. I like the idea of knowing what you've put in. At least obviously with the mythical tournaments, that's usually how it plays, and even with the live. But obviously you can start making some bigger bets if you're rolling. But I like that feeling of kind of knowing what my commitment is, and knowing that everybody next to me is kind of dealing with the same starting point. because I think, when you play cash games in poker or you're going to just bet horses, you can feel like your budget is unlimited at times, or you have that next strong opinion and you bet it harder than you should or less than you should or whatever. I think in tournament play, the structure of it allows you to really narrow down, focus on the plays that are most important to you, and kind of have a sense of what the scale is that you should be swinging with.
It's a great point, and I think that idea of having a fixed cost for your action, certainly some players, not naming names here, there might be another one on the phone call who's been quiet the last couple of minutes, but for those of us who have some impulse control issues sometimes, having the sort of fixed cost of a tournament and then being able to be as aggressive as you want, and that same aggressiveness that can be potentially a liability as a cash player becomes only a good thing as a tournament player. Do you agree with that, JK?
Absolutely. I don't know who you're talking about, but no, I mean, that's, we've talked about it before. I think the ability to part with that money is a huge edge when you're playing in those large, especially the larger dollar amount contests. And obviously you've seen Justin involved in some of those as well. So it definitely adds to the excitement, I think, of the game.
I want to ask
for what it's worth, by the way, I think I got to jump in since we're on the DRF discussion here. I thought the model for the World Championship handicapping obviously worked out for me. It went pretty well, but I love the setup of kind of the mythical, but still cutting off the field at different points and making it so you don't get into that stage where people really are just stabbing. And I think that makes a big difference because the mythical side can be prone to that. But having the 2 days, 30 races is plenty of races to get a real sample size, and narrowing things down as you go. I really enjoyed that format, and I think it's something different and interesting.
A couple of pretty clever guys must have come up with that format, Justin. That's all I'll say about that.
I had to say it, I had to point out, and I really did enjoy it. I'm not just throwing it out there.
Well, I obviously missed a trick in not doing more with you at the time on the back of that success. But what would you say your favorite contest format is to play in, the WCH finals aside?
Yeah, I think so. I got to play the NHC this year for the first time, which was fun. It's a grind though, which I kind of underestimated. I think for me, my most success is probably going to come from large sample size mythical tournaments. It just, again, it kind of prioritizes picking winners. It prioritizes handicapping well. It de-emphasizes constructing tickets the right way, which is probably my biggest weakness. I want to get better at it, but if I had to pinpoint where I am right now, I'd say handicapping over betting for me. And the reality is I think it also minimizes a little bit the importance of stabbing and the big long shots, because if you have 15, 20, 30 races, the more you have, the more it's about getting horses into the winner's circle rather than getting that 30-1 shot in the winner's circle. So I think for me, those are the ones that suit me best. So I had a decent run in the NHC. Obviously, the World Championship was a good setup, and I find those when I can. But I'm trying to get better at the live money ones, because obviously that's where the big paydays often are, and hopefully can keep improving on those.
Certainly the future, and something that we at the World Horse Players Tour have focused on. Speaking of World Horse Players Tour, proud to be involved as a sponsor at Equestricon, sponsoring the tournament panel, and looking forward to seeing and getting to meet a lot of listeners out there. JK and I are both pretty booked in a good way for the 2 days at Equestricon. Wanted to talk to you, Justin, about where the idea came from and how the heck, with everything else you have going on, you found the time to get involved in this great event in the first place.
Yeah, the idea actually came, it was about now maybe 3 years ago or so. Time is flying a little bit, but we actually first met Dan Torgman of ABR, and also who wears many hats in racing. We met him
literally
a couple
and
years ago. Yeah, exactly. Very nice-looking, stylish hat. But, so we met him a couple years ago, and I think, he floated the idea to my wife Katie and I think thinking we would tell him he was absolutely nuts to talk about doing a fan convention for horse racing. But, we kind of went with it. I remember we just sat down and we kind of got on the phone together and pulled a I think I had my iPhone, notes out, and we were just throwing ideas out. We probably threw about 80 or 90 ideas out for things we wanted to accomplish if we did this thing. And I would say we probably got about 50 or 60 of them done in some way or other in our first year last year. So it was something that went, fairly quickly from this is just the kernel of an idea to, okay, we are making this happen and we're just going to go do this. So it's been a hell of a ride. It's been, a learning experience at every step. We're obviously very excited to have year two to be in a big city like Louisville, to be tied with the Breeders' Cup. And as far as your other question on time, while I'm certainly I'd like to think a meaningful contributor, I mean Katie and Dan are absolutely the real workhorses behind this thing, and they get a ton of credit from me and should get credit from anybody who's seen the work that they're doing. I can't even imagine, the hours that they put in are unbelievable, and it's hard to see anybody else pulling this off on the scale we have with the amount of work that I know that's been going into it.
Dan's been a guest on the show before. We need to get Katie as a guest before this year's Equestricon too. Let our listeners know one event this year that you're particularly looking forward to. And just to continue the theme of the two-part questions, let folks know where they can find more information and sign up to participate.
Well, I think, certainly the biggest kind of get for us, so to speak, in year two, I think is hosting the post draw, which is not something we knew from the outset was going to work out. So it's very nice for us to be able to bring the top connections from horses all over the world, presumably coming in Monday evening to Equestricon. There'll be a space set up in the facility. There'll be a somewhat private area for the connections to stand and to mingle and so forth. But otherwise, the whole room can see the draw going on. We hope that many of the connections will kind of circulate around before and after the draw. We're really trying to bring something that feels exclusive, but we're trying to bring it to the fans as best we can. And we know Breeders' Cup's vision and mission is to make the top racing accessible, and we think we're able to be a big part of it, and we're excited to do that. And as far as all the information about the events, we have everything up on equestricon.com. It's EQUESTRICON. I know it's a fun one to spell. There is a ton of content. You mentioned the tournament handicapping panel, but we've got probably about 8 different workshops. I know you guys, as you said, are pretty well booked on our handicapping schedule, and we're happy to have you back, as you both were involved in year one too. But on top of handicap, and really any area of interest you have in the sport, whether it's media and photography, whether it's handicapping, whether it's ownership, breeding, whether it's just wanting to hear stories from a lot of the biggest names in the industry, all of that's going to be there. And for the true, the memorabilia collectors and fans, we have a ton of autograph signings, including Team Justify and Mike Smith, Bob Baffert. They're coming actually, I think, with the Triple Crown trophies to do pictures as well. So it's, whatever level of fan, if you have an interest in racing, I think there's going to be stuff there for you.
Yes, I'm very excited. You mentioned before wanting to learn more or needing to develop more about ticket construction. That's one of the areas that I'm going to be talking about as the host of a panel that includes Mike Maloney, professional player, obviously my co-author with Betting with an Edge. That's going to be a really fun one. I think we're against something pretty tough during that one. We might be against Tom Durkin, I think JK said, but lots of very handicapping specific stuff, as well as some great fan experiences. I can't encourage folks enough to come join us.
Justin, one of the things I'm really excited about in racing now is Craig Bernick's initiative with the Thoroughbred Idea Foundation and the wonderful piece that went up about breakage, and just kind of really, I think a lot of times in these situations we get to a point where people know a lot about something and they kind of talk down to people for not understanding it. And I think what you guys did really well was explain the situation fully, in an in-depth way, in a respectful way, to educate everyone about a problem and then some ways to fix it. Tell us a little bit how you got involved with the Thoroughbred Idea Foundation and some of the things you're excited about with that organization moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really the way that I kind of ended up in the discussion it was a couple things, but I know I was speaking with Craig just kind of on a personal level about some of my own frustrations, some thoughts I had, And I think it was just a matter of timing. I kind of went to him right at the time he was really starting to get this idea in his head. And I think he had in mind that the goal of the kind of types of people he was trying to get involved are people who have been, in and around the sport, kind of. I think he likes to use the word impatient. We want to see things happen. And at least in some instances, I think, including myself, we've invested in trying to make change. I mean, obviously, Equestricon, the impetus behind it in a lot of ways was to try to help kind of move the sport forward in its fan development efforts and in reaching a broader audience. So I think it was just a profile I'm happy I fit at the right time, and so I'm happy to be a part of it. I know that going into the first paper, the breakage one that came out, and which to me seems like it's been generally very well received, we really wanted to make sure that we were trying to find an issue or issues that resonated with people, that would kind of allow us to establish a foothold as an organization that gets the issues, that wants to make change happen, that wants to advocate, in large parts for the two groups that we focus on are handicappers and owners, and we think those are two of the foundational kind of groups in the industry. And something like breakage, I mean, we think there's an avenue there for us to accomplish something. We think people are, have been generally aware of it, but as you said, I think, when you get in the weeds, sometimes you lose people. So we had to strike the balance of getting technical, but also, keeping it accessible and interesting. I think Pat Cummings did a fantastic job, and he was the primary author of that paper with feedback from several. And so I think, we have laid the groundwork, at least, of what we intend to do. And now our job over the next, months and years is to try to remain a relevant, useful organization, because obviously we know that, organizations can cycle through sometimes. They can have the best of intentions and either, things just kind of go by the wayside, or they get a little stale, or they lose, kind of connection with people. So whatever it is, it's on us to try to keep carrying momentum forward and make something of it.
And you've got the right team to do it, and it's something else I'm very excited about, hopefully finding some ways to help out with that paper. Just being the beginning, looking for some great stuff from you guys in when it comes to breakage and other areas as well. Let's move on, gentlemen. Let's talk about some racing. We've got just over 20 minutes left today and about 5 races we want to talk about. We're going to start off at Parx with a trio of graded stakes, starting with the Grade 3 Gallant Bob. Might be a Grade 3, but there's some serious horses showing up for this dance. Justin, as our guest, I want you to go first and give us your thoughts on this affair for Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the theme of the day, even and this race fits it, is that for quality dirt racing, I didn't think there's a ton of pace in a lot of these races, which was kind of an interesting theme. And when I saw that, I see the 7-horse War Giant moving to the Navarro barn. I mean, he's coming from a high percentage barn at Gulfstream anyway, but this is a horse who, even when he doesn't break that well, seems to get to the lead. So this is going to be a class test, but I think it's very possible that he gets clear. And at Parx, I don't think you want to be that far on the inside anyway. A lot of these guys try to get off the rails, so I think Force probably breaks well from the 2-hole, but I see War Giant sitting there right in his hip pocket, or even going to the front. And I think he has a real chance to pass the class test here, just based on the way the race sets up.
I like that you're starting, like many seasoned horse players do, with an analysis of the pace situation. Just curious what tools you use to make assessments about pace and how important that is in your general handicapping.
It varies, but I mean, sometimes for me, I've at times gone into Brisnet speed figures. I've used the DRF pace figures. I've used all kinds of different things, but I think in the end, just looking at the class of the horses, the distances they've been running, and I do make real notes of gate speed in races. I think in dirt racing, especially, getting out of the starting gate really can change the way a race goes. And I try to actually visualize basically where every horse is going to be in the first couple hundred yards, at least when I have enough time to do that in my handicapping. And I really felt like in this case, War Giant, if he breaks at all, could find himself in a pretty good spot.
Nobody bets pace as much as Jonathan Kinchin. Definitely in his wheelhouse. I was guessing War Giant might be a pick that he made. Where did you end up here, JK?
Yeah, no, I do like. I think I said yeah, no, but that's all right. I like War Giant.
Jar. I got it covered on the mistake jar.
I've been doing pretty good, to be honest. I like War Giant here. Obviously, to switch to Navarro with this speed type cutting back and all of those things. And I agree with Justin. Forced from down on the inside, coming off the 132-day break, should show some speed fresh down there. And what else are they going to do with him? Rate him and let him eat dirt for the first time in his career? That doesn't seem like a winning plan. So I feel like he'll be moving forward. I mean, I think Frenzy Fire is one of the obvious ones. You know, we've talked about the fact that this horse has been looking for shorter, wanting to cut back from the flat mile win in the Dwyer to the 7 furlong performance at Saratoga, and he ran just fine. But this is going to be the first time he's run 6 since the second start of his career. So this cutback could even be better with some pace for him to run into. But he's 2-1. The creative one for me is 7 Trumpets. I thought 7 Trumpets ran well last time. Couldn't really get to his freaky stablemate promises fulfilled, but was running down on the inside. I'm not 100% sure that's where you wanted to be on that day. I think 7 Trumpets has always kind of suggested that he was going to be a nice horse. He ran a good race last time, and the cut back to 6 could be what he needed as well. So I'm going to try to make some money with 7 Trumpets, but I'm definitely thinking that the most likely winner is Frenzy Fire.
So those would be the 2 if you were starting picks. JK, you think you'll play this pick 3 sequence?
Yeah, no, I gave this on for out of the gate. So I want to use those 2 horses, 7 Trumpets, Frenzy Fire. I'm also going to use War Giant to get started, and then I'm going to get a little bit skinnier the rest of the way.
All right, makes sense. Let's move on to the Grade 1 Cotillion. JK, we'll keep it with you.
You know, Monomoy Girl is obviously the class of this situation. You know, I think that the mile and the 2 mile and an eighth races, the 2 Grade 1s that she's won this year, the mile and an eighth might not even be the distance that she wants. I think she's a mile and a 16th type. I do not see how any horse in this race can beat her at this distance with the time they had in between, the design time they had in between to train her up to this, with Wonder Godot having, you know, the poor performance in the Travers, with Midnight Bisou not getting the job done in the Alabama, with Separation of Powers stretching out. I mean, I just think Monomoy Girl wins by 7, 8, 9, and then you have to make a decision what you want to do with her come the Breeders' Cup in a couple of weeks.
There is some 4 to 6, it looks like, JK, available internationally on Monomoy Girl. You take that and run away and hide?
Yeah, I'd buy it, and then I'd buy it right now, and then I'd run to the ATM, and then I'd run to the ATM, and then I'd call the bank and say, look, can I raise my ATM limit today? I'd do all the online verification. I'd take out another, and then I'd buy it again.
Any fear? So let's say it's the typical Parx dead rail. Let's say Florent is, you know, I'm not saying this is something that would happen, but let's just say it's theoretical universe here, goes right down to the rail anyway. Do you think is there a scenario where the track could beat her if not ridden correctly, or do you think she has so much in hand that might reduce the margin to 2 instead of 7?
Yeah, I think she wins no matter what. Yeah, to your point. And Flo's not typically one that gets buried down inside. He actually prefers, I think, the other version, the outside. So somehow I think he'll find a way. She's tactical enough. She's forward enough. So she should be able to get all. Look, I don't know how many races Flo's riding on Saturday at Parx. I would imagine it's not that many, and I would imagine this is the biggest one and the only one he really, really cares about. I mean, I'm not saying he's riding something else. I'm sure he cares about it. You know what I mean? If the rail is dead and he cannot find a way to get off of it with this tactical and talented filly, then he's going to get roasted on Twitter.
We all live in fear of getting roasted on Twitter. Justin, are JK and I right? Is this a 1-horse race, or do you have a more creative view?
Yeah, I think the win spot looks like a 1-horse race. I mean, the only thing that makes the trip possibly dangerous for her is that I think the real speed is right to her outside. You know, the 3-horse, this jump ruler, I think, you know, she wired the field by 14 or something last time out against much lesser competition, but I can only assume they're in there for one reason, which is that, she breaks and she goes. So if there's any chance Monomoy Girl gets buried on the rail, it's because they kind of send with her, and that one's just more intent early than she is. But no, I think the class is big on Monomoy Girl. I think handicapping wise, all I was trying to do was see if I could find a couple to kind of throw out of it, and maybe try to get a price in. So I'm against Wonder Godot. I just don't think. Sometimes I feel like Cassie, the horses run a bad race, and you want to say it shows confidence to come back, but he's come back a few times, and I feel like they still don't fire the next time. So I'm thinking maybe she's just a little over the top. She's run a lot of races, and Midnight Bisou. I mean, it was hard to really find an excuse for her to get beat as badly as she did, at least last time out. So I thought maybe you play Monomoy Girl and try to put if Jump Ruler does get loose or hang on for a piece, and I thought Separation of Powers just ran so game last time out. I mean, she really battled all the way down the stretch. Worst case, she bounces a little bit, but she's just, she seems like she's coming into form. She's shown she can go, a mile and a 16th. I think she's the long shot that hits the board if there's such a thing in this race.
Makes sense. JK, what are your thoughts on Separation of Powers in this spot? You mentioned you thought the distance was maybe a question.
Not necessarily. I think she'll stretch. She didn't run that poorly in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. She ran well in the Frizette, so I don't think the mile and 16 is going to be a problem. She's probably working herself back into form. I just don't think she's the quality of some of the horses that are going to show up in here. Obviously, Monomoy Girl. But I also think that Midnight Bisou, I was against her in her last two races because I actually think she's going to be better running shorter. So I think getting back to the mile and the 16th, where was the distance that she probably had her most impressive race, and the Mother Goose, I think that's going to definitely help her out. But I don't see a world in which Midnight Bisou ever runs by Monomoy Girl.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Bisou. Justin, you were questioning, how bad she got beaten on the last day, but I think that you can conjure an excuse besides the obvious. She didn't see out the trip, and it gets back to that old school Andy Beyer move into a hot pace trip angle. They went quick early there, and she did make that move in the middle of the race, trying to win the race. And then I think between what was potentially an early move, at least when you look at the Timeform US running line, and the fact that she didn't really see out the trip, I think that margin's exaggerated. I don't see her winning, but she's one I would definitely be sticking in seventh. So wagering wise, JK, I take it for you this is a horizontal. Is it a horizontal spot only? Dead single?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to just try to hook this up in some multi stuff. I don't. The only other thing I could maybe get interesting is maybe a chocolate martini, Monomoy Girl with chocolate martini, or Monomoy Girl with Bisou. I'm against Wonder Godot, and I'm just a little bit nervous that everyone else is going to be against her too, so there's not going to really be any value there. So, no, I don't really see anything that I want to get involved in here. I think I'll just probably try to connect it with some surrounding races.
And Justin, just to recap, you're looking at verticals here, and what do you think those tickets are going to look like?
Yeah, I think Monomoy Girl looks solid on top. I think I would probably use Jump Ruler and Separation of Powers underneath, and Midnight Bisou would certainly be the other one I would throw in if I'm going one more.
All right, let's move on to the Pennsylvania Derby. Some interesting stuff going on in this spot for sure. Justin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's another one where there's not a ton of pace. I thought for this level of competition, there aren't that many that really want to be up there, and certainly the classiest horses in the race seem not to be. McKinsey seems like he should be either on or very close to what pace there is. And ordinarily, I'd say coming into a grade 1 mile and an eighth off a long layoff is a dangerous proposition, but. I mean, Baffert does it time and time again. We saw, Dream Tree a few weeks ago. I mean, he's had more than I can mention, but she was obviously ready to roll, on the big stage. So I think he's the deserving favorite in here. But I thought the horses on either side of him were the prices that were interesting. I thought, Mr. Freeze. I think there's kind of a Dale Romans look to him. I would say the horse that seems like he's building with each race. He's built up with distance. He finally, he really broke out last time out against not the same level of competition, but he looked good doing it. And I actually thought Trigger Warning's interesting. Again, he's one, they ran him in the Travers. He got stuck on the rail. And I thought, with that post position, they had to send. And he ends up, toward the back, saving ground, but on a racetrack that you couldn't make up ground anyway. So I would draw a complete line through that one. And his 2 starts previously, he's right in contention with horses that are going to be single-digit odds in here. And he probably will get the setup. He'll have pace to be close, and he'll get to see everything unfold to his inside. I think McKenzie probably runs away from him, but as far as a 20-1 shot that might just get a trip that allows him to hit the board, I thought he might be interesting.
It's an intriguing case. No mention of Hofburg from you, Justin. Are you anti?
I am an exotic level guy on Hofburg in here. I think the horse is, he was a deserving buzz horse all year. He took care of, weaker opponents the way he should have at Saratoga. I just don't love the setup for him. It's that more than anything else. I know they're putting blinkers on. Clearly, I think the intention is to be closer than he's been. But I do think, he could be trip compromised near. And that stretch at Parx does not allow for the big late run, in my experience, at least generally doesn't. So I think, I could very easily see him running a second or third where we're saying afterwards he should have won, but I don't know that he wins.
It's a totally fair point, and I've been on this horse's bandwagon since the day after the Derby, and I would probably limit use here to second and third along the lines of what you're saying. JK, who wins the Pennsylvania Derby?
Well, I think the horse is not only going to win the Pennsylvania Derby, but he's going to be my early selection to win the Breeders' Cup Classic, and I think that's McKenzie. So I have to like him in this spot. I remember the buzz around McKenzie just kind of, he was Bafford's Derby horse until this other horse came along, and some poor horse came along and won the Triple Crown. And I think that McKenzie is if you look at from a handicapping standpoint, in March 10th, the race where the tricky Bolt Doro race, he ran a 125 time form US. That was 196 days ago. That was in March of his 3-year-old year. Now we're talking about almost October of his 3-year-old year. He's had 3 7-furlong works leading up to this. I think he's definitely going to be fit. He has the back numbers that suggest that if he improves a little bit with these horses that have been running late 3-year-old year, 125, 26, 27, 28s, I think he's going to be extremely tough in here. He's forward, he's tactical, he's drawn outside to avoid that rail. Mike Smith doesn't need to be reminded of that situation. He rides off in here, it feels like every year during this time, and I just think he's going to be extremely tough. I'm always against Hofburg. I think he's a very overrated horse. I think that he's a horse that we're still betting him off of his maiden win. I know he's got some trips, and I get all that. Yeah, he was 1-5. Who ran second in the Jim Dandy?
I look at the clock, not the horse that ran second. We're in America here.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm telling Rob Dove you said that. But yeah,
it's all right. I don't like Hofburg here either. I just don't need you to beat up on my horse. And by the way, don't let the powder from the silver wig get in your eye, you fanboy.
Okay, so here's I do like Instilled Regard. I'm very interested to see how he runs for Chad. It feels like not that Hollendorf, not like there's a Chad off of Hollendorf for move up. It's more of if Instilled Regard was making his 100, his first start off 140-day break for Hollendorfer, I'd be interested in as well. I just think it's an interesting change of scenario, change of scenery, a new rider, a new trainer, and I think Instilled Regard could be a little bit difficult. That is if Larry Best doesn't decide to shelf him until next year between now and Saturday.
Oh, dear. You brought up something else I wanted to talk about, but there's 6 minutes left in the show, and I don't want to put Justin on the spot having to comment on that anyway. We'll save that one, JK, for Tuesday. In all seriousness, kidding aside, you touted McKenzie weeks ago for the Classic at, I think it was something like 25-1 was the price on offer at the time. So glad to see you sticking with your guns there. And next time you're out on the course with LeBron and Cube and B Squared, maybe you can get, next year, some information on what's going on in the Baffert Barn next year for us. Let's move to Belmont, gentlemen, and let's talk about the Noble Damsel. Quickly, if we will. I don't know, JK. You don't always. I'll send you an email. You're like, I saw it. I didn't read it. Did you see that email? I saw it, but I didn't read it. Did you read the email where I said we were going to be talking about the Noble Damsel on the show?
P, I read all of your emails. I read them all like it's, I have a little star next to it. When you email me, it pops up. No matter what I'm doing, it fights through.
Who do you like in this race?
Uni. There's not a lot of pace in here, and Time Form US suggests that to be the case. Obviously, Hawksmoor just doesn't seem to be the same filly where she was taking advantage of these races where there wasn't any pace on the East Coast, and maybe the switch to Manny might change that a little bit. But I always feel like Uni is going to be too connected. She's going to be too close in this situation, and we'll be able to quicken past her. I think Uni is a top-notch turfer for Chad, and I don't think there's a lot of creativity here. I think she'll be tough. I'm
glad you've learned your lesson. The filly that caused you to get that relief pitcher mustache last year, and you've finally gotten on the bandwagon. Justin, your thoughts on the Noble Damsel?
Yeah, well, you asked where being an owner can come in. I mean, we ran a filly in the Della Rose, a filly called Bletchley we own a piece of, I mean that racetrack that wasn't soft. That was a swamp. I mean, it was just that was the day they canceled a couple races. I mean, I was shocked they ran ours. I think they knew it would fall apart if they didn't. So my mindset is if she ran a race like that, if Uni won that race off basically a 4-month layoff, I mean, she couldn't have been 100% fit and still look that impressive over what had to have been a very tiring racetrack. So I think she is the Chad horse in here that I could see being a Grade 1 winner, where I feel like Jama Weil has kind of had that. She's had her chances. She's run the same race a lot. I think maybe she's already shown what she is, and I don't see anybody else in here that's moving up enough to bridge the gap. So actually, Uni's probably my strongest winner opinion of the races we're looking at.
All right, makes sense. Definitely one of the podcast favorites over the last couple of years. Uni, glad to hear the support in her corner in the Noble Damsel. We're going to talk about one more race. It's the Grade 2 Kelso at Belmont later in the card, skipping ahead to race 8. Some familiar names in here as well. Justin, where do you think you're going to go?
I mean, sentimentally, I got to go with Battle of Midway because he actually was my biggest hit in the BCBC last year. He was I had him and Sharp Azteca in that race.
Nice.
So I have good memories and associations, and obviously, I mean, last out he finished second to Catalina Cruiser, who, I feel like I've talked to enough people who say he could be the greatest horse in the world. So I'll give him credit for a good runner-up effort off of a delayed or not happening stallion career. So he's there, but I thought Pattern Recognition might be the one that's kind of starting to move up. Probably gets the setup. The horse does, as I mentioned, has some gate speed. He should be able to see everything unfold to his inside. I know that there are plenty. It's a depleted jockey colony that day with racing going on in other places, but you've still got Gaffleone coming in to ride, who's ridden him before and has some confidence with him. I just like the way that I think he's going to set up here. And I thought as far as trying to catch any kind of a price, I mean, Realm ran a nice race at Saratoga. It was against the bias of the track. If I remember right, it was kind of a gutsy, rail performance. And he might be, after, 20 plus races, he seems like a light switch has gone on for him. So I thought he might be a use, but I think I'm Pattern Recognition on top, and I like Battle Midway and Realm to hit the board.
I like it. JK, where are you here?
Sentimentally, I have to bet against Battle of Midway. That same race Justin's referring to cost me about 30 when we were alive to Sharp Azteca, only in that race. So that was a frustrating one. But I will say this: we talk about it all the time on these shows. Some of our favorite calls. The 2011 Kelso is one of my favorite Tom Durkin calls, where it was Jackson Ben and Uncle Mo. If you haven't heard that one or forgot about it, you can pause the show now and go and watch it on YouTube and then come back. All right, great.
That was pretty cool call, JK. You're right. That's awesome.
I love it. That was vintage Tom Durkin. I like No Dozing here. I thought No Dozing. I liked him a little bit in the four-go. Obviously, I was having a serious crush on City of Light, who arguably ran the best race that day, anyways. And so I kind of got off No Dozing, but I thought No Dozing had a pretty tough trip there. Maybe the extra ground it can help a little bit. The one-turn mile. I'm going to give No Dozing another shot here. I think he'll probably be ignored a little bit. Probably the second or third choice.
a little bit of disagreement on this one. Justin, did you have anything against no dozing, or you just preferred yours more?
No, not at all. And actually, I mean, I was on no dozing in the forego because I really liked his race the first time in Saratoga. Again, nobody was passing horses at that point. At least, it didn't feel like anybody was kind of going by on the outside. And behavioral bias was like, I mean, he was the horse to beat that day. He had the trip, and this horse went by him off a layoff. So I actually moved him up a lot off the allowance race. And I can't take much off him in the forego. It's the same situation. He kind of ran all the way around in the same spot. So no, I think he's very credible. Again, it comes down to me more that kind of, visualizing how this race plays out. And I get the feeling pattern recognition gets to sit right next to him if he wants to. And he's going to get the opportunity to decide when he wants to make the move. And maybe no dozing gets asked a little earlier than he needs to be. But we'll see how it plays out. I would have nothing against that horse for sure.
Interesting Saturday of racing for sure. And that's all the time we have on this edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I want to thank Justin Nicholson for joining us. Great stuff. Really appreciate it. We'll have to, no good deed goes unpunished around here. We're going to have to bring you back on soon. And JK, thanks as always. Thanks to producer Craig, Willie Nile, Travis Stone, most of all. Thanks to all of you for listening. You make the show so much fun to do with your various tweets and comments and questions and flag downs at racetracks. We really appreciate hearing from our audience. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. May you win all your photos.